Oh, we're streaming now, are we?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I don't know what Curtis is going to tell me, but he can tell me when we're finished. Hello and welcome to White Line Fever Kicks and White Line Fever Live. And what are we doing here? Well, I figured the only way to do this show once a week, when you rely on guests, sometimes they bail out. It's hard work just trying to find a guest sometimes. And when you just do evergreen stuff, as we found out last time, there's a lot of production involved. There's a lot of research and scripting, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to have a few other formats that aren't a kind of evergreen documentary and aren't an interview. And so I've come up with this one, and I draw a lot of these ideas from music podcasts and music stuff on YouTube. And this one's called Love Hate, which is actually a band if you like your 80s hair metal. It's also I think it's an Irish TV show as well, Love Hate. But in this case, it's going to be Love and Hate. And we're going to talk about something that's really fresh. And that is Origin 1. And I'll welcome to the show Curtis Woodward. Hello, Curtis. How are you?
Good, Steve. Good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, I'm not recording, so I might just record as well, just in case.
We'll fucking do that again.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So so we're going to go through 5 things that we love from Origin 1 and 5 things we hated from Origin 1. And I got my Twitter followers to volunteer me for either love or hate. And they all think I hate Origin, so they, just because they're vindictive, they said I had to say 5 things I love.
You do though.
Well, to an extent. So I'm going to start off with the first thing I loved about Origin 1, which, as we know, was a 50-6 win for New South Wales over Queensland. And that is the venue. Can't read it. No, the stadium.
We got it. I can see it.
I've never been to Queensland Country Bank Stadium. And it actually befitted, like 20 years ago, you would think that would be a stadium in the middle of Sydney or Brisbane, and you would have been happy with that. In fact, even 10 years ago. So I thought it was great. I thought the crowd were very well behaved. It seemed there was a great atmosphere. They loved to have Origin in town. The joints sold out. You could walk back to South Bank or the other street on the other side of the river, and have a few beers. I thought the venue looked fantastic. Can't wait to go there. What do you think there, Curtis?
Well, so my first one, if we're going from 5 to 1, what I hate was the Turbo versus Teddy thing, and this is the one egotistical thing that I have about this whole thing is a couple of weeks ago through the 81stminute.com, dirty little plug for my website, but I mentioned something that New South Wales won't play Tedesco as a pure fullback because Tom Turbo is way too good to play like that. And I even named Turbo at 1, which maybe had been for a few clicks and a bit more engagement on social media, but I absolutely said that Tom Turbo would not play as a fullback. And it was crazy how I haven't seen tactics like this in a game for a long, long time. And it takes a lot of balls to do what Fittler and Greg Brandy Alexander did. I actually thought that what they did was probably the most tactically amazing thing that rugby league's seen in maybe 50, 60 years. It was just they completely threw everything out and just went, you know what, we're going to connect the centres with the centres. We're going to play 4 halfbacks. And when I say 4 halfbacks, I mean the 2 halves. I mean Jake Trbojevic and Tedesco. And Tedesco actually took a back seat to what Tom did across the field. So it was intense, and I loved it. I haven't seen anything like that for a long, long time.
So that's your number 5. Mine is a controversial one, actually. My number 4. It's the discipline, because even though there was a couple of incidents with high tackles, people were looking for dozens of them. They wanted to find a dozen of them, 20 of them, and they found a couple where the referee and the video referee and maybe the video review committee were a little bit lenient. But basically, I thought
Yeah.
it actually showed that Origin is not dead when you're not punching blokes and you're not, you're not head high and then coat hangering guys. It was really quick game. It was entertaining, but it was entertaining in a different way. And it was mismatched. So we don't really know how it would go if it was tighter and everyone's got hard under the collar. But generally speaking, I thought it was a triumph for the idea that Origin can survive the post-Biffo era. I thought it proved it can. What do you think?
Oh, well, look, the question of that is, Steve, and that goes to I'm looking over here it's actually my number one hate, which comes back, and we can do this now. We can do my number one hate now, is the Cameron Murray getting hit and knocked off until 2025. I mean, he got hit that hard in the head, and it looked like a send-off or a sin bin at least in any other year. And then he was out of the game. Mm-hmm. But the problem is the fact that Vanderlei says, we're going to do one thing here, and then Origin's here, and everyone before the game saying, oh, no, we're definitely going to officiate this game the same way. But it wasn't. And I'm thankful for the fact that we are on the national stage where people from Western Australia and South Australia and Victoria and Tasmania tune in 3 times a year and they watch Origin and they see Murray get knocked out and they go, that's why I'm watching. But for the people in New South Wales and Queensland, they're thinking, why is that not a sin bin at least? So that's my number one. That's my number one hate from the game, is that of all the things that happened in Origin 1, that was the one thing where I think the NRL had to stand up, the referees, and said, you're off for 10.
It's not far from there, though, to a clean or to an Origin where there's no, there's no send-offs or sin bins and there's no reason for them. There's 1 or 2 this time. So it wasn't like wall to wall. So, I think the players were more disciplined because of the recent climate. I thought there were some tackles that might have crept up or that did it. Now, there were a couple that were dodgy and probably should have been cracked down upon, which I've seen people point out and which the NRL are getting quite defensive about. But it's not far away getting to the point where they want it to be. So I thought that was a good thing, not a bad thing.
Steve, and there is memory fog. There is memory fog where, because it only comes around, once a year. So people forget in that 12-month period. And when they want to get fired up for Origin, they go to YouTube and they look for big hits and punch-ons and all that shit. That's great. But I think by the time we get to Origin, people are so fired up for it, they forget, the little A's and B's about everything else. But I think people also forget that Origin is not just about that. Origin, some of the best games of rugby league anyone's ever seen are pure games. And unfortunately, on Wednesday night, New South Wales were absolutely perfect, and Queensland, who weren't, when you look at their list, they weren't that bad. They had a good team. It was just New South Wales were way too good.
My number 3, and I actually crossed out something here. I originally wrote some of the coverage, but then I changed it to most because some is a bit hard. I thought it was, I thought that was brilliant. Some of the things that they're doing in the NRL this year, both channels, with that kind of cinematic camera, extra high definition when after the tries, and it wasn't a drone. I think it was on a pulley, behind, and there was a camera that was on the goalpost, and the one on the rails. I just think it's another level, and it certainly beats beats what you see over here. To me, it beats what you see over here in sports coverage. Even though it's very good and technically advanced and expensive, it's kind of a bit stale. They don't have that kind of spirit of innovation that they continue to show in the NRL. So Congratulations. And and I know people love to whinge about copy takers. I know people love to whinge about commentators, but people weren't whinging that much about the commentators, the other night, which is good as well. So, I thought the coverage, the people involved in the coverage on the host broadcast, which is Channel 9, I thought they deserve a round of applause. They were good.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been a long time, and like you would see this online as well, being over there in the UK now, but even in your time when you were still back in Australia, is that you would see on social media, particularly Queensland fans, when they went through that period where they won that a trillion series in a row, is that it was very biased. But I would give Channel 9 credit and say that they done very well. And even Gus's, did you see Gus's intro? That was pretty good. It was pretty good. So I'll give Gus credit for that.
Yeah, well, at least you know what he says to players all these years when you see those things, And I guess if you're, it's more effective if you're sort of just being strapped and you're ready to go out there and rip people's heads off than it is if you're on your third beer or whatever. With kickoff about that, but at least you know what he says to the players. My number 2 thing I loved about Origin, and if you've just turned us on, we're doing a thing called Love Hate, and it's Love Hate Origin. 5 things we love, 5 things we hated. I'm up to my counting down from 5 to 1. I'm up to number 2 of things I loved, and it's Nathan Cleary. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was like as good as I've ever seen him play. And, I kind of, as someone who doesn't watch 8 games a week anymore, I guess I've missed some of his better performances over the years. But to me, that showed, what he was capable of, great playmaker, he just, he got split open. I thought maybe he was a pop zid at one point, but he got split open. That was the thing. If I was going to do hate, I would go the blood bin. The blood bin wasn't very well enforced, I didn't think. Blokes stayed on while they were gushing blood. Just superlative performance from Nathan Cleary. What can you say about a bloke who plays that well on that stage? So that was my number 2 thing I loved about Origin 1.
Oh, look, I'll agree with that, Steve. And you can probably help me with this more than just as much anyone else. Is that, for example, someone from, I don't know, the late 80s, like someone like Peter Sterling. When you talk about Peter Sterling now, everyone says, some people say he's a potential immortal. But when I see his highlights on YouTube, he doesn't run through the line and skip over people and chip and chase and do a backflip and then it tries. Peter Sterling, what he did was he kind of glued the rest of the team together and made the rest of the team better. And I think there's a bit of Nathan Cleary and Peter Sterling about that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Peter Sterling's one of the best players I ever saw. I'd rate him in about the 3 or 4 best players I ever saw. So I think he's a great player. You're right. I mean, actually, it's funny you mentioned Peter Sterling. Of all the players you could have pulled out, because I saw a clip where a guy was talking to Adam Blair on Warriors TV, and they asked Adam Blair, who would you bring back to help the Warriors, from any era? And Adam Blair said Greg Inglis, and the host said Peter Sterling. And Adam Blair said, well, Peter Sterling in today's game, he's like, he couldn't see it, But I mean, it was a slower game, and the teams were closer together. So I understand. I kind of understand how someone younger might see that. But to me, Peter Sterling was a fantastic player, and who knows? Who knows if Wally Lewis would be the player, now? I think he would. I think Peter Sterling would be a good player now. But
absolutely,
yeah. My number 1 is the Samoans, Luai and To'o. I thought they were fantastic, and I love that thing they did that the NRL have tweeted, which someone's turned into a TikTok cartoon. I love that. They're great, and I love the fact that they want to play for Samoa, and we saw Mal Meninga having a whinge before kickoff saying they're not available for Australia. Well, they got rid of the international weekend, and you can't tell me part of the motivation. The clubs don't want to release players, right? That's the reason. The clubs don't want to release players. The players now cannot choose a Pacific country over there's no date clash anymore, right? So the problem in the previous last years was that the players had to choose, and they chose their Pacific country. So what they do, they got rid of the test. They got rid of the test so the players don't have to choose their country over their state. And so they're choosing the state, and now Mal's whinging that they've chosen the state. We'll bring back the Pacific test or bring back an international window at Origin time, and then, Mal, you won't have the problem because the players who don't want to play for Australia won't play Origin. So, so I thought they were among the two best players, and I think it's fantastic to think that they might be over here in 4 or 5 months playing under Matt Parrish for Samoa. So that was my favourite thing about Origin 1, the Samoans.
Beautiful.
What about you?
Oh, what are we up to? Okay, things I hated. So, did we already touch on
the format? The format was I was supposed to do number 5 thing that I hated, and you were supposed to do number 5. I thought we were supposed to go 5 to 5, 4 to 4, 3 to 3. That's all right. Just do it.
We're not live, are we, Steve?
Yes, we are. Yes.
No, I'm just joking. No, that's a famous Alfie Langer line on the footy show as well. I'm pretty sure we touched on earlier, or maybe we didn't, but I'll go with number 5, the argument about Tommy Turbo versus James Tedesco. And a couple of weeks ago, I said on Twitter about the fact that New South Wales will absolutely 100% not play Tedesco at fullback. It will be about Tom. And what happened on Wednesday night was we basically saw the old days where we had, centres connecting. We had basically 4 halves. When you think about it, you had 2 halves. Then you had Tedesco playing second wing to Tommy Turbo, and you also had Jake Turbo as well. So Paul Green had no chance. He had absolutely no chance, and I saw Greg Alexander last night on NRL 360, and he was so happy. And I guarantee it was Brandy. 100% it was Brandy, and said, we need to play this way. And what they did was they said, Tedesco, James, you're the captain. You might be the best player in the world, hypothetically, but this guy called Tommy Turbo, who's been injured for the last 2 years, let's get him in, see what he can do. So they basically ran it in the field with 2 centres, 4 halves, 2 fullbacks, and Queensland had no idea what hit them. And it was madness. That was my number 5. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Am I rambling?
No, keep going.
All right, so number 4 is the Queensland bench. And it was absolutely ordinary. So AJ Brimson, who has played for Australia at the Nines, all right? He hasn't played for the Kangaroos yet, but he's played for the Nines. Queensland picked him on the bench with 3 other cyborgs. I think it was like Sua, Offingawi, and somebody else. I can't remember the third name. But Origin now is just as much about tactics in the 20th, 25th, 30th, 55th, 60th minute than it is the first minute. I knew straight away when New South Wales picked Queen Haas on the bench that the Blues were going to kill Queensland through the middle part just before halftime, just after halftime. I think Paul Green, who's even admitted in himself that he screwed up as his first-time Queensland coach. Not with this, but looking at his bench to start with, I hated that bench. And the fact that someone went out to the media before the game and said AJ Brimson is going to play sometime on hooker. He's never played hooker in his life. Anyway, that's number 4. Number 3, God bless him, he's 175 years old. Ray Warren called the game from Sydney. And I know, Steve, and I'm sure you can confirm this as well, he's got certain issues about flying and dying and stresses about life that he doesn't need. But how hard would it be to get him on a Channel 9 Concorde? Is that still a thing, a Concorde?
No, but I didn't know he called the game from Sydney, actually. I didn't know.
Yeah, no, so he called the game from Sydney. And that to me, Like Ray Warren deserves to be able to call a game from Sydney. If there was COVID, if there was issues in Queensland, if there was an issue with Qantas planes going down 2 weeks before, he had to jump up on the plane and go up there.
I'm glad I didn't put all the coverage. I didn't put all of the coverage. That's one thing I don't.
It nicked me off because it's more. Maybe it's more of a inclusive thing where, and it does happen, Steve. Now, I don't know if you know this, but 2GB when they're calling games, they would rather sit in Pyrmont or wherever they are now, wherever their offices are, and they'd rather sit there from 12 to 10 at night, and they don't go to games. And I think people don't like that. I think people want their commentators at the grounds. Maybe that's a personal thing, but I didn't like the fact that Ray Warren couldn't get his ass up. God bless the bloke. Happy birthday. It's actually his birthday today. Happy birthday, Rabs. But get up Townsville, mate. Number 2, Origin hosts. Let's get my paperwork here. So that actually says Origin host. So we'll refer back to this. Oh, okay. This is what it's about. People on social media having a go saying just because of COVID, the Victorian government pays, hypothetically, say, $20 million to the NRL and says, come down to Melbourne, come to the MCG, 100,000 people. Now people, just because of the shift, say that Origin should be played in Townsville or Canberra or Newcastle in heartland areas once every couple of years. That's outrageous. Origin is on the world stage. It should have already been played in Auckland. It should possibly already been played at Wembley. It should have possibly already been played in, I don't know, Singapore or Hong Kong or whatever. But for people to go back into their bubbles and say, oh, how good was this for Townsville? That's a one-off. And I think people don't understand the reach of Origin and the tourism and the government money that goes into it. So I'm a little bit angry about that because people in Townsville go, this is great, but don't forget that if it's stated in the MCG with no COVID, then the local Victorian or the Melbourne people would have had an influx of $25 million worth of tourism. You know what I mean? So let's not go back into our bubbles because I know you're a growth guy, Steve. So what do you think about that? Do you think that it should go back to, like, just because of this COVID thing, should it go to these, and I don't want to call them hick towns because they're rugby league towns, and it's very rude to say they're hick towns, but I think that Origin should have already been in Auckland. I think Origin should have already been in Wembley. Like, it should have already happened.
I agree with you. But that's kind of the society's become very parochial and tribal during COVID, hasn't it? Like everyone's been kind of, they're looking inwards. They can't, in many cases, they can't travel like they used to, and that's people's viewpoint has become more insular and more myopic, during this pandemic. So it's probably indicative of a wider problem. But no, that's a very good point. A couple there I wasn't even aware of. I didn't know that Rabs was in Sydney, and I didn't know people were saying that they should play more games in Townsville or whatever. So I reckon it's been a great, vibey, upbeat episode, and we should go out without letting it peter out. We should go out on top. Thank you for complying with the format, Curtis. I hope everyone enjoyed the one that we did a couple of weeks ago that took weeks of editing. It's up on YouTube now. And don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or like if you're watching on Facebook or whatever. And for me, my plug for this episode is patreon.com/White Fever. Support the show. Curtis, what do you plug something?
Perfect. There's a novelette called Ghost Kicker. It's online everywhere. And also this shirt, which is Gold Star Superstar Magpies. That's available on the MacArthur Rugby League shop. So have a look.
Awesome. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us.